Hey, it's Mike Henry and Roger Courville with Follower of One's new live stream. Here I am with Mike and Roger. Hi, everyone. Roger, tell everyone hi.
Glad to be here. Hello, and happy whatever day it is of the week it is that you're watching.
Exactly. Yeah, so we're recording this on a Monday. We've moved our new time for our live streams to Mondays at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, and wherever you are in the world at that time. And we want to talk about how we can integrate our faith at work. Our topics will be varied, but we started and we decided to title this show "Here I Am." And part of the reason is because it's a key phrase for us responding to God's call in our lives. Do you feel called, Roger? Do you feel like God's calling to you?
Yeah, in fact, the more I get into it, the more I'm amazed at how much the workplace is a mission that is near and dear to God's heart.
Yeah. So to get started, would you spend a moment just introducing yourself? We talk like the people who are watching this know us, but maybe they don't. And so let's introduce ourselves. Go ahead.
Hey, everybody, Roger Courville here, and a longtime business person. Started 5 companies, went from Microsoft to startup, and got some angel money and blah, blah, blah. That and $4 to get you a latte. That said, I have a heart for Jesus, and now working on my doctorate in ministry at Denver Seminary.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm Mike Henry. I spent a lot of years in the work world, and all of my career, my professional career was in business, except for the times when I was kicked out or was in between jobs or whatever. I was working in business. And so, but I became a Christian in the workplace and struggled trying to figure out how to integrate my faith and work. And so that's part of what prompted the creation of Follower of One. And we hope this becomes a very interactive live stream. And so I want to encourage you, if you're watching this live stream, consider doing a couple of things. First of all, subscribe or like or follow us. We're on a number of platforms, or at least we hope we are. And and let us know where you are. So Dale Young says that we're live on LinkedIn. Very cool. So there's our first friend telling us that we are somewhere. So thanks a lot, Dale. And but let us know where you are, where you're watching us. We should be on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And also we are live. We should be live in the Mighty Networks online community that Follower of One uses as a place for us to meet. So Roger, let's start off the conversation. Today we're talking about what happens when God calls you and you respond, "Here I am." And we wanted to begin with the life of Abraham. You've done some research on that a little bit, so tell us what you found.
You got a few hours? Abraham is one of the pivotal narratives, of course, in the whole Bible, and for good reason. And I think in particular, useful when we think about it from a particularly Christian sense, given that the three great
Yeah.
monotheistic religions all look to Abraham as a patriarch. And there are so many implications for what and how this touches down for us throughout the story. I don't know about you, Mike, but maybe the place to start might be the place where he actually says, "Here I am." But there are so many places where the nature of his story touches down in ways that may inform
Yeah.
how we think about Monday morning connecting to Sunday morning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to say hi. My wife joined. So Vicky joined us. She's watching. And also Dale apparently joined on Facebook as well. He's checking us out in all the different locations. So thanks to Vicky and Dale for commenting and letting us know that you're seeing this. I I began and I documented Genesis 22 mostly because I was searching through the Bible to find the words "Here I am," and that's where Abraham responds to God with those words. But in a way, he reacted that way in when he was first called in Genesis, what, 11 or 12, correct?
Yeah, well, the story starts in Genesis 11, but really Genesis 12 is the beginning going, all
Hmm.
right, the Lord God says.
Yeah. And God called him out, right? Tell us about that.
Well, interestingly, even though the text at that point doesn't have Abraham saying, "Here I am," that's
Hmm.
how he's behaving, right?
Yeah.
So Abram and Sarai were born, near Ur of Chaldees, right? And the then dad, for whatever reason, packs up and moves them to Haran, which is about 600 miles kind of north ish,
Yeah.
and then Genesis 12 kicks off with God going, "Do this." Right? I'll make you a great nation. I want you to follow me, go from your land, your relatives, your father's house, etc. And it's obvious then that Abraham did, which meant he was not going to someplace he didn't know
Yeah.
and leaving behind a whole lot of what he did know.
Yeah. Exactly. And I want to say hi again to Dale. He just found us on YouTube as well. So Dale has validated that we're all the places we plan to be. Thank you, brother Dale, for doing that. I appreciate it. So yes, Roger, I think that was so wild. He left everything that he had for the most part, right?
Well, yeah, that in fact that's the implication, right? We don't know too much about his dad, but when the language in Genesis 12 says, "Go from your land, your relatives, and your father's house." Right? Remember that the word house is quite literally where we begin to get an understanding of even what business is, right? The word economy
Mm-hmm.
comes from the word house.
Yeah.
Oikos nomos in the Greek is house law or house rule. And of course, back then it was the patriarch, but it wasn't just your wife and kids that were part of your house. It was your servants, your slaves, everything else. And it was the nature of family and land and covenant that was kind of the source of wealth, right? So for him to leave his father's house meant he was leaving behind the inheritance, right?
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, where he was going to was from a fertile area, right, in part of the Fertile Crescent near the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, to a land that wasn't so beautiful. Otherwise, a whole lot of people would have lived there already.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting because we see Abraham and he seems to he has these spells, right? It's 10 chapters later when he says, "Here I am," relative to Isaac. And he'd made some pretty serious mistakes in the interim. But I also think God was kind of building him up. So, what are some of the things that you noticed as you were studying this that were what happened in Abraham's life because he said, "Here I am," to God?
Oh, there's a bunch. One of the things that I mean, to be totally fair, today when I share something, I'm going to try to share some historical context and things like that. We're not exegeting the scripture, but that means it's, not the kind of thing you're going to hear on Sunday morning. The question is, hey, what were some of the contextual or practical implications here, right?
Yeah,
For instance, Haran was a trading destination, right? It was a busy intersection city because it was home of a big moon god cult, for instance. And
hmm,
when God says, "Hey, I want you to leave," part of what he was leaving was paganism,
yeah,
right? So it wasn't just a you pack up your bags and go thing. It was actually a complete metanoia, right? Not unlike when you say, "I will follow Jesus," right? In fact, even Joshua 24 says, yeah, and this is God speaking in Joshua 24 says, "Yeah, you were worshiping other gods."
yeah,
So at some point he heard, in a sense, Jesus say, "Follow me." And he's like, "Okay."
yeah. Interesting. I no, I think it's exciting as well because I spent a lot of years thinking that following God meant that I had to quit doing everything I wanted to do.
Right.
And yet here's a man who made this choice. He was apparently we don't know a lot about the reasoning behind it other than the fact that he did it, right? And
Right.
but I've learned by doing the same thing, I've learned that there's joy in obeying God, that we find joy and peace, we find love and excitement, we find other things because we let God transform us and we get to take part in those things. And that's why I always liked Here I Am. For me, was just a simple way of punching in. It was just me saying, me getting on God's clock every day. I didn't want to waste my life. I wanted to live my eternal life if I could. And I kind of draw the line. I'd say crossing over from living my secular life to living my spiritual life. I want my time to count. And that
Right.
Here I Am is where I kind of draw that line.
I love that phrase, punching in, because I mean, sometimes we know stuff in our head and it takes a long time to get down, the 18 inches to our heart. For instance, if we go back to Genesis 11, that's where you find the story of the Tower of Babel, or more accurately, Babylon, right? And remember what the people were doing. They said, we'll make a name for ourselves. And yet one of the things that God promises right then at the beginning of chapter 12 is, he says, I'm going to make you a great nation. I'll bless you. I'll make your name great.
Yeah.
Ooh, make your name great. Well, in fact, he did. But I think it's a useful, compare and contrast, because in one sense, in a pagan sense, it was like, I'm going to build my personal brand for me, as opposed to God unilaterally saying, I'm going to do this with and through you. Are you coming? Right. And I think it's useful for us to remember that the mission is Jesus's mission, and where and how that touches down might have a particular place and time that is unique to you, including your spiritual gifts. But our spiritual gifts aren't for, even if we study spiritual gifts, right? They're not for ourselves, they're for others. And I think that's because the nature of God's mission in the world is for others, because he says, Abraham, I'm going to bless people through you. And his heart, even back into Genesis, clearly is for all people at all times.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to interrupt real quick and then come back. So Dale's given us another comment here too. Dale, thanks Dale for letting us know. He's on the different channels and trying the live stream out. And so Dale, thanks for leaving us a comment. If you're on any of these platforms where we're located, leave us a comment and let us know that you're there, and let us know that you can hear and see and do everything okay. We're excited to be trying this new platform out. And so real quickly, what I was going to say about Abram's thing, I believe we get to this point where we're not thinking about God at all, and we believe that everything we want has to happen for us. And it's when we do things for others that God's economy really kicks in. But we don't experience God's economy. We can't come to his economy naturally. Without his intervention, naturally, we would all end up selfish and striving for ourselves and doing our own thing all the time. And here I am, this being aware that that this is not our universe, it's his. And that when he calls, part of my job is to be available and to do what he says. And then I get to wrestle with myself. But if I will give away the things that he calls me to give away, if I will sacrifice the things that he calls me to sacrifice, if I will do the things that he calls me to do, then I get to experience his joy. And I think we just get those reminders over and over again.
That we do. Yeah, there are a number of places, and I won't list them all off, at least right here and now, but just to your point about whether or not it's for you or for the glory of God. Yeah. One of the challenges sometimes is that we think of the Bible or Christianity as a corporate vending machine, a God-shaped vending machine where if we do this, then we'll get this blessing. Whereas the promise of the promised land to Abraham was both a literal promise, but it was also, typologically something that we are all still in in process for on the trajectory of salvation history. And, God followed up his promises by saying, oh, and by the way, your ancestors are going to be, resident aliens for 400 years.
Yeah.
And meaning there was a piece of my promise to you that you're not going to see in your lifetime.
Correct.
But one other thing with
time.
regard to kind of just even how we think of this stuff and whether or not we trust, and obviously the whole story of Abraham is about trust. But remember when he parted ways with Lot, right? They got so successful that they're like, okay, we got too many livestock here to share the same space, so we need to go our separate ways. And Abraham says to Lot, you choose. I'll take what's left. Yeah. Well, can you imagine in a corporate divestiture situation, going into a situation going, yeah, you choose what you want. I'll take whatever you don't take.
Exactly.
So counterintuitive.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying that's what we should do. I'm just suggesting that the level of faith or trust that was demonstrated there, and that's not the only story, the level of faith or trust demonstrated there was huge.
Yes. Well, and sometimes I think we miss out on that, right? Because we do what we think needs to be done instead of, apparently God was challenging him to do that, to give Lot the advantage, and that God would make it work. It's nervous to trust that from time to time. Oh, there are a lot of stories like that in Abraham's life, though, right?
Yeah, there are. One other that comes to mind in a little different sort of way, but it has implications for the nature of relationship, right? In Genesis 14, there's a battle, and then there's the whole Melchizedek story, that kind of mysterious figure. And not only does Abraham pay tithe to Melchizedek, right, the king of Sodom, but he refuses to take any of the spoils of war except for just covering his costs for his own employees. And he says to the people that helped him, you can take whatever you want, but his point was, and he says, it's so that none of you can say, I made Abraham rich. And, right. And so I think it's kind of interesting that the nature of his commitment to following God, and he did so imperfectly, right? Remember, he gave his wife twice. So there's, he was a nincompoop like the rest of us.
Yeah.
But he's like, wait a minute, I don't want you to be able to hold this over my head. Was, I think, a demonstration of valuing the vertical relationship as opposed to the horizontal relationship in terms of priority.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got a friend who just joined us online too, and he's asking me questions. His name's John Schinkel. Thanks for joining us, John. No, this is Follower of One is our ministry. So for your comment, I'm not in a good place to leave a comment back. But Follower of One is a ministry that Roger has joined me in. I'm the one that started it, but there were a lot of people that were involved in helping us get this ministry started as well. And thanks
if you
for
know
commenting
Carson Wentz,
on the live
you can
stream.
tell him he can come join us too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and but back to what you were talking about, Roger. I think it's exciting to see all these things that happen throughout Scripture were because people were listening to God, and many of the bad things that happened were because we weren't. Many of the things that ended up being good, even like in Abraham's case, it took centuries for some of what God has promised Abraham to come true. Some of it still hasn't come true yet. And
Yeah.
God is, but God is active, and he's working in our lives, and he's working to draw us to him. It's kind of also where I got this whole notion I got from a couple of books and other people about helping people move one notch closer to Jesus. God's constantly drawing us to him. And if we draw near to him, then he makes things right. And so we get the joy of taking part with him by helping other people draw near to him. Abraham saying, here I am, caused him to have to sacrifice his son, though, too. Right? It's sometimes we get called to do some things that look a little wild, don't we?
Yeah, in fact, that's a curious part of the story, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's such a dramatic story that, most of us, recall the story, gonna sacrifice son, no, God will provide, and God
Yeah.
provides the lamb kind of thing. So many spiritual implications there. But if we kind of back up and look at the trajectory of Abraham's faithfulness, including his times of kind of being an nincompoop,
Yeah.
he actually says, "Here I am" twice, right? Both in the call to sacrifice his son, and then the angels goes, "Yo, yo," and he goes, supposedly, has the knife up over his son, and he says, "Here I am." But I think if we back up and kind of place it in the broader narrative,
Yeah.
in a way, this is kind of looking at the. It would be kind of like if you and I were putting our strategic plan together for our business, and we went, we thought we were going here,
Hmm.
and now it looks like we're going here.
Yeah.
And that change in direction actually happened multiple places, not just in that explicit use of him saying, "Okay, here I am," but he was a nomad, so he probably left, whether he was right in the city in Haran or outside of the city. He left and became basically what we might think of as like Bedouin tribesmen, right?
Yeah.
And traveled, right? Went from Haran to Shechem to Bethel to Egypt and back to Bethel and to, I'm looking at my notes, to Mamre, which is Hebron, and then to Hobah. So, right? Oh, you thought your business model was here
Yep.
and it's in this location, and now your business model needs to be transportable.
Correct. Yeah. And when you said earlier, when you and I were talking about this, right, that may even require that you have a different business model, right?
Yeah.
You've got to be mobile, or you've got to be moving it around, or you've got to, you know, so it's not farming, not if you're moving.
Yeah. Well, and we know that he then went on to become wealthy in that
Hmm.
process.
Yeah.
It says in Genesis 13 and 14. But it might even have been a change in his relationship to capital,
Hmm.
right? So one of the thing that the Sumerians, Mesopotamian Sumerians were, right? Because at the time, 4,200 years ago-ish, which is different than Ur of Chaldees, was like the biggest city in the world, right?
Hmm.
Highly developed with regard
Yeah.
to culture and arts and music, had the most advanced legal code anywhere with the Code of Hammurabi. And silver was a big deal. Well, why did people start valuing silver, right? You can't eat it, you can't build a house out of it. Well, it was because as a means of exchange, it was a whole lot more efficient
Yeah.
than barter. But another key element of a part of why currency evolved historically was transportability.
Hmm.
Well, now can you imagine becoming wealthy and sitting on a whole big pile of silver? How many caravans do you need to haul your silver around? As opposed to if your wealth now takes the form of something that can walk. And that means you're not going from Haran to Shechem very quickly.
Yeah.
But when your wealth can walk, that may have, I'm obviously speculating, but that very well could have changed up some of the nature of how he thought about conducting business
Yeah.
transactions.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, giving me flashbacks because I grew up working in the trucking business. You started talking about the caravans. I'm going, oh no, I don't want to go back there. But there are a lot of great people that make a good living in that industry, and I'm grateful for the people in it. I'm just glad I'm not in it anymore. It's a challenging way to make a living for sure.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that's interesting to me about all this, because we talk about this, clearly Abraham had this life that was listening to God in overall. He still had these occasions where he didn't listen very well. He took things into his own hands, and a couple of times there were consequences were particularly difficult. Um, I think it's exciting though how God involves himself with the life of this guy for the purpose of choosing a nation for himself so that he could bring a Messiah. The strand of the logic of all of this just blows me away the more that I learn about our faith and the more that I learn about our God. all these things blow me away. And then down to me, light years later, we have this opportunity to listen to him. We have the opportunity to do the same thing, to answer him. Here I am, and be available for the next thing. What ideas come to you? We're about the halfway point in what we were planning on doing for this talk. So, what ideas come to mind? What are some things that we can challenge people to help them start thinking about saying, "Here I am" to God more? What can they look forward to? What can they expect? What kinds of challenges can they expect? Any ideas along those lines?
Well, I mean, I think we could spend a long time on just challenges, right? I mean, if there is, to borrow language from the military, if there is something that is particular to our time and place in history, it is VUCA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and perhaps even for somebody watching here, an element of working in a place of hostility.
Yeah.
So there is some part of, uh, you know, it's not antithetical to both totally trust God and to bring your gifts to bear to be a good steward, if not image bearer to the people that you show up with. Because while God is omnipresent, he also has a personal presence inside of you. And that means you literally are bringing a sanctifying presence of Jesus to a meeting when you go to a
Mm-hmm.
meeting. And I think there are all kinds of things that flow from that. Um, one of which is even just reminding ourselves that we may not fully be aware of the impact of what God is doing. Right. So, one of my favorite little Old Testament, New Testament connections is when you get to Hebrews 13,
Mm-hmm.
and and that kicks off and it says, "Let brotherly love continue. Don't neglect to show hospitality, for by doing this, some have welcomed angels as guests without knowing it." And a lot
Yeah.
of theologians think they was referring to Abraham welcoming in the three angels, um, and who he probably didn't realize was a theophany, wasn't the
Yeah.
presence of God right there on the spot. But what was the culture of the ancient Near East? Well, it's kind of weird to us to think, yeah, if a stranger comes up and knocks on your door, you're supposed to show him hospitality. Well, that's kind of weird today.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, knock on your door. Would you give me a meal? And yet that was kind of the nature of the culture there. And
Yeah.
to the point in the writer of the Hebrews, um, said, some have you don't know who you're serving here. And to me, if there's something that falls out of that, that I was even personally challenged by, it's not only just thinking in terms of hospitality, but the way that we do things in a way that doesn't expect a return.
Yeah.
Right? Many times in a business context, we have networking lunches or that kind of thing where we do this in expectation that at some point there will be a return on the investment of that activity, as opposed to the pure religion, as James talks about, taking care of people who
Mm-hmm.
from whom you may expect nothing. And I'm just thinking, how much of my relational development have I built in some time margin for, where my goal isn't transactional, it's relational.
Yeah.
And so that whole welcoming strangers could very well be, oh, when's the last time I took somebody out to lunch just to bring the presence of Jesus to them for an hour?
Yeah. That's one of the places where I get as convicted as anything, is I can get very transactional in everything that I do. I think we're always looking for trying to create certain results, or I think that an outcome that I'm trying to achieve is dependent upon my effort. And so I exert the effort so that I will bring about this goal that is the outcome I want. And that's not the way God works at all. And so to I want to be available to listen to him and do what he says just because he said it. And that's kind of what one of the other reminders that the phrase "here I am" is for me. Yes, sir. What do you want? I need to stop looking for what I'm going to get and remember that God's my boss. Um, it's exciting. I see we got another comment on here from Tammy. Hi, Tammy. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your comment. It is all about Jesus for sure. And, but yeah, I'm excited. I get excited because it's when I can remember not to be transactional, or when I can turn it off and just give things away, then how that works out to me, I'm basically trusting God to do his thing and leaving it to him. Right? Because if I
Yeah,
try and
you
keep
know what?
score, then I'm back in my old game.
Right. Which is so easy to do. One, because we think in terms of productivity and efficiency, so it's not efficient to go spend some time, extra time, to be intentional about serving someone or just befriending them. But it's really just the nature of how the gospel flips everything upside down, right? It's not
Yes.
identity achieved, it's identity received.
Yes.
And Dale made a good point a little earlier. He says God wants to do things through us.
Mhm.
Why would he choose a broken vessel as me to be part of his plan? In fact, that even ties to the Abraham story, because remember, not once, twice, Abraham, to save his own butt, went and gave away his wife. Right. And
Yeah.
if we look at the heroes, so to speak, of the Christian faith, most of them were dingbats,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yes.
It's like, oh, I'm going to sleep with this dude's wife and then get him killed in battle, or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know about you, but I find that actually kind of encouraging, going, wait a minute. It's God's mission. And it's not because of me, it's despite me.
Yes.
So he says, I see you and I love you, and you're not more messed up than I already know you are.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's a great challenge and a reminder that the heroes of the faith, many of them weren't really heroes. They were just people who chose to do what God told them to do. And they didn't choose that every time by any means. Almost all of them had other problems, and it's a help to me because I always feel like the before picture. I never feel like I'm worthy of anything like that either. But like Dale said, it is cool that God would choose someone like us. And it's also cool that he has my own degree of error kind of factored in. He knows that I'm going to screw up, and yet he can still use me, and he makes it work out for his good.
I was thinking about relationship a little earlier today, and thinking about how sometimes we believe that we don't deserve love,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what is so amazing about grace is that it is given to us not because we deserve
We
it.
deserve it. Yeah.
And then, and we've all had these moments, I think, when we've been the one giving love, and the person on the other side actually is struggling to receive it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that when we're when we're really wearing the Jesus hat well, it's that agape love that says, wait a minute, no, I'm going to love you right where you're at. I'm going to
Yeah.
meet you right where you're at. And that's another thing that's really counter to a performance culture in a business environment. And that doesn't mean we don't hold employees accountable or whatever. But
Correct.
then but there's a difference. We can hold people accountable in love, but probably more importantly, there isn't a person out there that doesn't struggle with the difference between the condemnation that comes from Satan as opposed to the conviction that comes from the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Well, I think that, and back to our topic, right? Here I am is volunteering to be accountable. It's volunteering to respond when given an opportunity to take part. My wife Vicky said it's being in the moment, right? Listening to God and saying, "What do you want me to do right now?" And that's the whole idea. That's the reason for the name of this show, the reason for what we're trying to do as followers of Jesus. I love the fact that even though I might have screwed up 15 minutes ago, God can use me again in this moment, you know?
Yeah, and this is both particular to the story of Abraham,
Yeah.
but also what you just said, which is we think of terms of vision and strategic planning as extrapolating from here forward.
Hmm.
But God's mission says it's done,
Yes.
and working from there backwards to where we are. Actually, when you think about it that way, then we're actually participating in the gospel
Yes.
when we move, like you say, one people one notch closer to Jesus. It doesn't mean we have to whip out the four spiritual laws, but when we move people one notch closer to Jesus, we're actually participating in his mission of bringing about his now and the not yet part of his now and not yet kingdom.
Yeah. No, I think that lines up perfectly, right? The great command, love God and love people. And whatever that looks like in the moment must be the plan. And Dale even commented that he loves how God is so big that he accounts for our errors. He has all that factored in. I think it works out, Roger, because like you talked about the illustration that you used, where he has solved this problem and he's working backwards and giving us an opportunity to participate in it. But the solution's already worked out, which is something I can't really grasp. Um, my mind just, I say those words, but it's hard for me to understand.
Yeah. One of my favorite books on the call,
Yeah.
what is the call of Jesus? It took me so long to kind of figure out my lane in life that I read lots of those books, but I really like Oz Guinness's. And he puts it this way. He says, nothing is more powerful, intimate, or important than to listen to the call of God, our creator, and to realign yourself to the very purpose of life and the universe by following his call wherever your life leads.
Yeah.
And for me, a really big transformation that frankly, it's still easy for me to fall back into old patterns, but a really big transformation was realizing that all of this stuff about spiritual gifts and strengths finder or those kinds of things, not wrong, but it's not about me. Right. And so much of that ends up being, to use the $4 theology world, so much of it ends up implying soteriological outcomes, meaning my path to salvation is finding my true self, as a
Yeah.
which is a half truth, right? Yes, it is moving in that direction, but as it says, Romans 12:1 and 2, don't be conformed, but be transformed. And the literally it's the difference between being passively molded or conformed to the broken pattern of the world versus actively being transformed by the renewing of your mind in a direction to this eschatological, this beautiful design, which we saw in Genesis 1 and 2 at the beginning, and we will see fully restored and consummated yet to come.
Yeah. You can tell which one of us is working on our doctorate. Uh,
I'm so busted.
so, but yes, I agree because I can do the here I am, right? And then I'm in the game. God puts me to work. And I think to me that's exciting. And it's an exciting opportunity because in the workplace, it may show up as letting someone else go first. It may show up as sticking around and helping someone else do something that they're having trouble getting done. It may show up as, helping someone else get promoted ahead of myself. It can show up in a lot of different ways. It did for Abraham, right? He let Lot choose first. He left where he was and he had to figure out a different lifestyle and business model. He had 300 people in his household at one point in time. We heard he ran a pretty large business. If you think
Yeah,
about it,
and that's the
most
male
those,
servants, right?
yeah,
So to whatever degree there were wives and kids, he's got 1,000 employees,
yeah,
so to speak, right? And he's responsible for feeding them all.
yeah.
Right? That
No,
it wasn't just a power thing. It was also a duty or a responsibility because, wow, yeah, how am I going to feed people? Famine
oh,
just
and he
hit. Now
was
what?
exactly, and in that regard, he was a business person. People weren't donating the money to him to do all of that.
Yeah.
He was earning it. And so I think that's what's so cool about the calling that we have as business people in the workplace. God's called us to be a part of his activity in the church, and the church being this body of us who follow him, not the people who all show up at the building on Sunday or the building itself, right? And I think that's part of what Here I Am gets me out of. It's not here I am on Sunday, I showed up and I'm checking my box. It's here I am, God. What do you want me to do right now where I am? I want my following of you to apply in this business meeting. Or when I'm being chewed out by a customer, I remember in the trucking business, something was always late. I was getting chewed out all the time. And, trying to figure out how to say, here I am, while you're being chewed out about something not getting where it needed to be on time. That's practical faith right there.
Well, so let me usurp the interviewer mic for a second and actually have you go deeper there.
Yeah.
Because when you started Follower of One, you came up with a set of activities that anybody can do, and it doesn't require you, coming out of the chute, spending 90 minutes a day doing something. Talk to me, maybe even in the context of this Abraham story, talk to me about the nature of what we encourage people, what you created to help encourage people to do in the context of a marketplace mission trip.
Sure. A nice switch you made there, because I was trying to be a good interviewer. So
you're on the spot now.
So this all came out of, the place where it really took form began right after 9/11. Many of us stayed home for a day or two or three. If I remember correctly, 9/11 was on a Tuesday, and our office was closed the rest of that week. And so the following week, when I got ready to go back to work, the whole situation with 9/11 prompted me to re-ask God, what do you want me to do? Are you going to put me into ministry, or are you going to leave me in the workplace again this time? Because I had asked that before. And the only idea I could get that day, I just got this idea, well, today I'm not getting another job. So what can I do today? And that was where the question was first. I remember first asking it. And I said, well, I can pray for people. And so I started praying for the people mentally. I would walk through the office and pray as I passed each desk in my mind for the people that I was interacting with, or that I might interact with that day. And over time, things started happening. I came up with 4 other things that I felt like were also things that could be done in any job at any time. And I don't have any constraints then that keep me from being a minister, regardless of my occupation. And those 5 things are: pray, appreciate others, know what you believe, serve others, and speak for yourself. And I believe we can all do those 5 things in any job on any day. And it begins, the first prayer that I talk about is, here I am. Because if I develop this attitude that God isn't at a loss for what I'm going to do today, He's pretty confident about what He wants me to do today. And it involves where I work, because I'm not powerful enough to frustrate Him. And so He's going to put me to work to do something today in the lives of the people that I work with. And so Here I am is just my reminder that that's what He's called me to do.
Let me put an exclamation point behind something you said and actually rephrase it as a reminder of what undergirds this, because you didn't say it explicitly, but something that undergirds all of that, and rightfully so, is the fact that when Jesus says, follow me, it's both an invitation and a command.
Yes.
And that's for all believers, right? So we often think of those called to ministry being the pastor or the worship dude or dudette. But the Great Commission almost universally among theologians, like go
Yeah.
love on people, love God, love people, is a command for all people. And there are plenty of other places in the New Testament where your call to mission is for every single believer. It's not just for people who stand up and preach the word on Sunday morning. And so I think that as this foundation that undergirds
Yeah.
everything is exactly why it's so important what you've begun here, to your credit for showing up for Jesus and saying, here I am, what should I do and starting follower of one, to equip people for that very task is in fact partly because love it or leave it, oftentimes churches just don't get to that as part
Absolutely.
of the typical nature of how churches unfold.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've managed to be in a lot of good churches over the years. But for the earliest parts of my memory as a believer, almost all of them, when I asked them, how can I be a minister? How can I be go into full-time ministry? It required that I quit my job or that I leave work and go do something else. And for the longest time, I felt like that I was being called to part-time ministry. My job while I was at work was to just stay out of trouble until I could get back out to the suburb and to the suburban church and do whatever they were doing. They didn't ever seem to be that excited about what I was doing. My job was to be a part of what they were doing. And that was always very difficult for me. I remember telling people that, if I didn't want to teach Sunday school or fix cars or pull weeds or cook breakfast, then there wasn't anything for me to do but stay out of trouble. And I knew that couldn't possibly be true. So I wrestled with that for a number of years. And it's not, no one ever did that on purpose, right? That's not the
Right.
message that we want to send people on purpose. It's that our church staff is designed and operates in a way that's supposed to mobilize us. But often that mobilization is back into the process of helping them and it becomes a little circular.
Right.
And, by our nature, you figure if 2% of all the believers in the planet are supposed to be helping the other 98% go do something, then most of those 98% aren't going to be helping those two. They've got to be doing something else. And
Yeah.
that's the challenge. And so if you're doing means that you're a bookkeeper or a salesperson or a truck driver or an accountant, that's a doing thing too. Abraham was an employer. Many people are entrepreneurs or employers. The church has focused a lot on those people over the last 20 years when they talk about faith at work, because those people have some discretionary time. But even if you have zero discretionary time, you could be in a call center and every time you put the phone down, you get another call, or working a counter at a fast food restaurant and everything is another person. But there's still opportunities for us to weave our faith into what we do every day, every minute by minute. And there's not a minute where my relationship with God's not relevant, you know?
Yeah. Well, I had the same experience. It's like, okay, I got these skills. What can I do? And they didn't know what to
Yeah.
do with it. And to me, another distinction that I made to my pastor once, church that I used to attend, um, was going, wait a minute, there's a difference between availability of my time versus my capacity to do something with the part-time way that you might employ me.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yes.
I also ended up frustrated thinking, well, I've got to go into full-time ministry to do full-time vocational ministry to
Mm-hmm.
be able to be of service, because unless I wanted to take over running the men's group or sending out emails to the small group ministry or something like that, they didn't know what to do with me.
Yeah. No, the analogies and the jokes about all this stuff, we could go for a while, right? But
Yeah.
the coolest point about it is God has a calling for each of us. If you're listening to this, we're grateful that you've been part of this live stream. In fact, I would love for you to give us a thumbs up on whatever channel you're on, or a like, or a snooze, or whatever you can do to help us with this live stream. We hope to find workplace believers and encourage them that their faith is something that they can integrate into their day. And one of the happy accidents about Follower of One is nobody has to quit doing what they're doing to take part in what we do. We want everything to happen in a small time frame. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say here, as we kind of you get toward the end of our time together, let's talk about that vision. Because at least one thing that I've been adamant about is that actually a good chunk of time, it's not actually listening to Roger and Mike, even if it's with Mike and Roger. It's saying, how do we bring in other voices, right? Whether it's authors or people who have something to say that touches down with leadership or management or productivity or whatever that happens to be, that relates particularly to our Monday through Friday, but helps us see things in a slightly different way. Mike, I'm curious to know, when you're thinking about the vision of where, say, this live stream goes and why someone may want to push like or subscribe, share a little bit of your heart with regard to the future.
Well, so much of this is based on the frustrations that I've experienced over my years as a believer. And there were a lot of years. You'd have thought I'd have figured it out faster, but I don't learn too fast. And so there are a lot of years involved. But I hope that people find this live stream when they're searching about the things that frustrate them as they try and integrate their faith at work. And so we started off with Here I Am. And I want to talk about some of the other people that said that too. So we've got some other weeks where we plan to do that. But I want to encourage, I hope that people find us. And that's why your likes and your subscriptions and your sharing are so important. I believe there are workplace Christians that are struggling, trying to figure out how to do this. And the answers are not easy to find. And some people search for them online, but all the words are used. It's really impossible even to use a good word. If we talk about people being marketplace missionaries, a group of people misunderstands because a missionary is somebody who goes overseas. If we talk about people being a marketplace minister, then many people misunderstand because they think they have to quit their job. If we use the word marketplace. Exactly, right?
They say, oh, wait a minute, I work for the government. I'm not in business.
Yeah, or in the medicine field, right? Or in the educational world. And then they don't think they're in the marketplace, or they're stay at home, or they're retired. And so all the words are used, which is part of the reason why we want to invite other people. I want to invite other people to get on this live stream. Let's talk about the things that bug you, because people will hear the collective voices, not the individual voices. It's not Mike and Roger that are going to get everyone's attention, right? It's every person who's struggling with this a little bit. If they step forward, take some action, say, here I am, then this becomes God's problem. I mean, to me, that's the coolest thing about the prayer, here I am. Everything after that, it's his problem. I don't have to worry about it. I just have to be available and listening.
Which sometimes is the hardest thing to do.
It is the hardest part, right? It's so easy to get absorbed with ourselves in all of this. But once again, my own degree of error is factored in. Tammy just reminded us of Colossians 3:23 and 24, and about how whatever we do when we work at it with all of our heart, working as for the Lord, not for human masters. And that's Tammy Burke. She's on our team. Grateful for you being a part of this live stream as well, Tammy, and for your involvement with Follower of One. We do have a calling, right? We have a job. And when we do what we're doing with Jesus, then the results become his problem. Sorry for the
final comment, and then I'll kick it back to you to close. To me, if there is a, because I love digging into words. The word worship literally comes from meaning worthship, meaning ascribing worth to. What is it that we really demonstrate of where we find value? Right. And of course, God says, yo, put me number one and all else will be shown to you. Right. And so I'll leave you all with a little homework assignment. That whole weird dude, Melchizedek, he's only touches down in 3 places in the Bible. And if you want to kind of see a connection between the Abraham story and Jesus, Genesis 14, Psalm 110, Hebrews 5-7. And you'll see this thing, in a sense, unfold where just as Abraham did, so also can we just go, wait a minute. There is nobody that deserves our worship more than the righteous, perfectly loving, just King of the universe.
Yeah, that's a great way to sum it up, Roger. I think Jesus was involved at the beginning. Jesus was part of the plan at the very beginning. He was the plan at the very beginning. He was the Word of God, right? And he became flesh and dwelt among us. But yes, the Melchizedek story, that's something I want to study more. You and I were talking about it. It's so cool to see what God is doing and how he will use people like us, and he will put us to work in the lives of people. And our time at work matters. What we do and the way that we interact with the people we work with, or the people the kids that we raise, or the family members that we live with, it all matters. And the friends that we have, you and I've met through a lot of this activity, and I made a lot of friends and experienced a lot of things. I'm excited to see how God's doing all of this stuff in the lives of people, and it's about him, not us. And so that's what's so exciting about it. But I also love the fact that it begins with, here I am. Lord, put me to work. What do you want me to do today?
Yep. Pretty simple. Follow me. Here I am.
Exactly. And that's what we do. Thank you, Roger. I'm grateful for you, brother.
Oh, it's so mutual.
That's what we do at Follower of One. Check it out. Followerofone.org is our website. We have an online community. We do this thing called the Marketplace Mission Trip, and we're doing a mission trip. We're always scheduled, another mission trip scheduled to coming up. You can go to marketplacemissiontrip.com and sign up to be told about the next one. We're working on some changes on our website, but now the mission trips all take place in our online community. So not only do you practice this life beginning with here I am every day for 2 weeks, but you also get used to this online community, which I hope becomes a growing, vibrant community for people who want to help one another integrate their faith into their daily life. If we can't find each other and help each other, isolated, we'll peter out. But I believe if we can stay plugged in with the Holy Spirit and connecting to one another, this will help us continue growing and doing like our little circle and arrow, keep moving up and to the right. And so I want to encourage you to check out followerofone.org or marketplacemissiontrip.com and share this live stream and our social platforms with your friends. Roger, thanks for joining me. All you listeners, thanks for joining us. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm excited. We will be here again next week at 6 p.m. Eastern every Monday night. So look for us, followerofone.org. Thanks a lot. Oh, no.